Alô, amigos do Multishow. Nós hoje estamos aqui com um convidado internacional, Nigel Morris. Nigel Morris começou a trabalhar na década de 80 em Londres com moda, depois se especializou em marketing e trabalhou com mídia. Depois criou a rede digital do grupo Isobar, que é parte do grupo Aegis Media, e saiu fazendo aquisições das mais importantes agências digitais no mundo inteiro. Nigel, welcome to Brazil, welcome to São Paulo. It's great to have you here. And how did you start that, going around the world and buying all that great agencies, including my agency, Agência Click?
I have to say, it's a great pleasure to be in Brazil, especially at this time of year where it's, it's hot and sunny as opposed to cold and miserable in London. And one of the exciting things that I have in my life, one of the boring things as well, is I do, as you say, travel around the world a lot, going to see some of the best and greatest digital agencies operating. We started on this really around about 5 years ago, almost exactly now. The UK and the West was still really in the dot-com crash. People were still very negative about the internet just 5 years ago. But we had actually done a modelling exercise and were predicting that 50% of all media consumption would be digital by the end of 2007, so sort of now. And we were tracking usage and consumption of digital media through the crash. And actually, the consumption and the usage were all still going up, and it was only a financial issue. And we actually made a decision as a group that we felt that there was a huge opportunity to create the world's first global digital marketing network. And I think it was a great thing for Aegis to actually support that vision. And so when we set the strategy out, we wanted, I had a very passionate belief that this had to be global, and truly global, and in my experience in terms of digital, meant that we had to be in a lot of countries. And we actually, quite arbitrarily, chose 40. We wanted to be in 40 countries because digital is the most global media, but it's also the most individual. It's the most thing that's closest to the culture, and the cultures of the world are very different. So we wanted to be truly global, and that meant in lots of countries, but we also wanted to be and have the best capability in some of the key disciplines, whether that be online media, whether it be search, whether that be mobile, whether it be in creative, whether it be in CRM. So I started going around and looking at different agencies around the world.
Do you think that it was something very important to be an Englishman living at the city, observing that the UK citizen were the first population that were really doing a fast movement on the digital scenario?
Well, actually, funny enough, I think that the US was probably ahead of the UK before the crash. But post the crash, the UK was the fastest out of it, and the fastest really in terms of really adopting it in a mass sense. And it's the UK is a very peculiar country because it's quite small, it's quite densely populated, and of course it has quite a high GDP for its size, but then it's also, from a media perspective, is quite special because it's very national, because it's so small and quite densely populated. And the latest forecast is that internet advertising spend will overtake television in the UK next year, and television has been the #1 medium in the UK for 50 years.
That's very interesting. And this year, Google have already been the vehicle with more income in England this year of 2007. Is that true?
That's right. It's quite amazing, the influence they have.
Nigel, in your experience to go around the world, if you would do a rank of the countries and the populations, where do you think that digital is more developed as a market, not as a technology, but as on a consumption perspective? As if you think about advertising, where people could be more influenced because the consumers are using so much the digital resource, media habits on their day parts, where the things are really happening faster and the investments are turning faster to the digital world?
Well, clearly the UK is one of those, but also Northern Europe. Actually, Sweden will also, internet advertising will overtake television probably this year as well. I think so. In Northern Europe, it's very developed as a market, but the markets tend to be a little bit smaller. It is actually, there's no such thing, one thing as digital. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time in Asia, and in China, you know, people are really, they're hungry for technology. They love technology, and again, as a consumption, digital is obsessive, especially in terms of things like gaming, in terms of instant messaging, very high there. Mobile is very popular in India and taking off in India. In a market like Korea, again, very advanced in terms of digital consumption and in terms of the digital market. And yet some other markets, it has been much slower to take off. And in a market like Italy, you know, which is a big market, you know, it's still only 4% of advertising spend. And even in Australia, I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago, and very high broadband penetration, very high usage, but internet as a percentage of spend is still quite low, and it's still a very television-orientated market. So we all say the world is getting flatter, and it is flat, but there are big differences in terms of market structure and big differences in terms of the culture of why people use digital and how they use it.
Let me ask you something. Do you really believe in globalization? I know that as you go to every big city in the world, when you arrive here in São Paulo, do you feel the same kind of sensation when you get to New York or to London or to Mexico City or to Sydney or to... Do you think that the kind of people that you see on the streets with their Blackberries and using the internet and the kind of information that people have and talk to you is the same kind of information, is the same kind of connection that people...
I really think there is. I really think that what is happening is that the fundamental cultures are still a bit different. They have their, what we would call nuances. There are those differences. And those are the differences that I think are fantastic. That diversity that makes people and makes cultures what they are. However, people are forming communities, communicating with each other across those different boundaries and through areas of interest. And I think that's really interesting, and that's where globalization really starts to become quite powerful, where those geographic barriers that did exist have been broken down by technologies, because we can communicate like that across 20, 30, 40 different markets because of the technologies that we have now. So you can form a community of interest. You can form a community around whatever it may be. But we both like running.